My name is Dr. Andrea Pennington. I'm an integrative physician, acupuncturist, and brand strategist. My career in broadcast and digital media spans over 20 years. As past medical director for Discovery Health Channel, I've had multiple appearances on Oprah, Dr. Oz, and CNN, and my TED Talks have reached 2.5 million people. I've published 13 books in the last few years, and now I work anywhere there's Wi-Fi. For the last several years, I've been helping other doctors, dentists, healers, and coaches from around the world to share their messages with global audiences through personal branding, publishing, online courses, and media training. And what makes this combination unique is that I am bringing my 20 years of expertise as a professional speaker and coaching other people on their TED-style talks. So I know what it takes to craft a keynote, a TED Talk, and even workshop presentations so that you communicate your message with confidence and clarity. Welcome everyone. How are you doing on this lovely Monday? I pray that you are doing well. How is everyone doing? Can you type in the chat and let me know where you are tuning in from? I am coming to you from the sunny south of France. Very good to see some of our usuals in the house. Hey, Alex, very good to have you here. And you as well, Shireen. Lovely to be connected. And we have Sina here. You must be up there in Denmark. And another person here in France tuning in. Thank you so much for being here. I'm very excited to have you here. All right, we've got sunny Florida, and we've even got sun in Ohio. This is awesome. And Arizona as well. All right, so this is awesome. Welcome to Deep Dive number 3. This is my gift to this time of quarantine, which seems a little bit crazy, I know, but after I went through all of the usual reactions when the stress response kicks in, we started doing group meditations and sending out healing and just, kind of bringing down the energy from stress. And now many of us are in action-taking mode. And so I don't know if you're here today to learn about how to create intellectual property so that you can pivot into a profit stream and a passive income stream. I don't know if you're here because you were forced to, meaning this pandemic has put you in a situation where you've lost your primary revenue stream. Or if you just have so much time on your hands that, you're finally ready to bring more of what's inside of you to the world. Well, it doesn't matter why you're here. I'm just grateful that you are, because what we're here to do is to help you craft a product or a course or a signature speech, because today is all about outlining your intellectual property. So if you happen to be someone who has previously worked in a one-to-one setting, like some of my doctors and healers and therapists out there, you might realize that with a situation like this pandemic, working one-to-one is very limiting. Now, some people, healthcare providers in particular, and fitness enthusiasts and nutritionists have been able to go online and do virtual consults and still lead some of their classes. But I don't know if that's happened for you. Even if you could or you couldn't, maybe you're just in a situation where you're really tired of trading time for money, where you're working in a way that's also very restrictive, and quite honestly, it can be very draining. if you're only giving a service or working for the hours so that you make a fixed amount of money, you're probably realizing that you can't scale that, meaning you can't increase your amount of income coming in if it's based on the hours in the day, unless you're willing to work nights and weekends, and that's not sustainable. So I'm sure that you may have seen other people who are actually able to still make money and still do what they love. And I don't know, maybe you've been a little envious, or at least you've seen people doing things that you kind of know you could do. Is anybody else out there like that, where you've had this feeling like you see some product come up, or you see, something on TV and you're like, I thought of that. I could have done that. Has anybody else had that experience? Tell me in the chat if you have. But even if you have envied others, you see these other people that just seem to be rocking it, and you're like, how are they doing it and I'm not? Like, I've got skills. Maybe you just don't know how to market yourself. I don't know. But during these deep dive business trainings, it is my mission to help you get past some of those blocks. Some of it just may be a lack of knowledge. Some of it may be some internal limiting beliefs. We are going to get you past them and into action. So if you have not yet downloaded the worksheet for this session, please do. If you have not yet registered so that you get emails with the replays and the worksheets and the slides, please do. So the actual slides that I've been teaching on for each of these deep dives, on day 1 of our deep dive, we defined your personal brand. And I gave you the step-by-step process to help you come up with your own USP, which is your unique selling proposition. And then in deep dive number 2, yesterday, we worked on nailing your niche, really getting super clear about your target audience, like who you are perfectly aimed to work with. So if you're registered for this series and not just watching on Facebook or YouTube, as long as you're registered, you'll get an email where I give you the worksheets and the actual slides from the presentation. And this is something that some of this exists in my personal branding bootcamp. I run a 10-day authentic personal branding bootcamp. But from this day forward, everything else that I'm sharing comes from my work with one-on-one clients in my mentoring programs. So the only way this is ever shared is usually just with the high-end folks. But I am sharing it with you because this pandemic has got everyone on the planet shook, yours truly included. And what I know is we can look at this as a time of panic and freak out and giving up, or we can go within and rise again. And that's what I'm committed to. I am committed to helping you rise again. And the way that we can do that is to really get clear on the gift of you. You've probably heard me say, you are a gift to the world. Well, now you're being asked to believe it, to claim it, and then to start living as though that is your truth. And the reason that's important is because there is a global awakening happening. It's not just the woo-woo spiritual people. Everybody on the planet is kind of waking up to the reality that you can't 100% rely on your government. You can't 100% rely on the healthcare system or the pharmaceutical system or even the food and manufacturing systems. They don't necessarily always have our best interests at heart. And so people around the world are waking up to the reality that it's time to reclaim personal responsibility and accountability for your lives. Now, that's an opportunity for many of the people that I'm connected with who are coaches or healers or therapists or doctors or dentists, or just people who know that in your heart you're meant to be doing something. Maybe you're meant to be a podcaster or a public speaker. Well, guess what? Now there are people around the world that are hungry for, desperate for the kinds of information and inspiration that is inside of you. And yes, they will actually pay for it. So that is why today we are focused on really bringing you the clarity that you need to understand exactly how you can profit from your wisdom, okay? So in other words, instead of looking at your life and going from this whole one-to-one thing, how many of you out there have been doing that? Type in the chat and let me know, what sort of business or industry have you been in? All my coaches and healers, doctors, therapists, veterinarians, I see you, Joanna Soares in Portugal. She says, let's rise again. Amen. Let us do that. Type into the chat and let me know what industry you're in. That way I can certainly address some of the things that are going on in this world that may be helpful for you. As many of you are now realizing, in these deep dives, I'm actually able to tailor some of the guidance during these sessions to your specific case. So this is not just some, sit by the sidelines kind of thing. I am really dedicated to helping you go from one-to-one into the one-to-many. And even for those of you, I see Audrey's in education, Joyous Beyond Pain is in sales and service, and starting now with energy healing. We have health coaching, Shelley Thomas. All right, so it sounds like many of you are in a position where you can leverage your intellectual property. And so that's what today's focus is on. So why don't we just get this party started, shall we? All right, so once again, today we are focused on your intellectual property, and my goal is to provide you with a proven roadmap so that you can successfully create your own signature product or signature speech in 30 days or less. Now, I know that is a very bold promise, but it is my mission to help you go from one-to-one to one-to-millions. And I'm going to show you how I've done it, how I've literally been able to build 6- and 7-figure businesses with this one approach, this proven roadmap. So even if you don't currently have a business, even if you don't currently have a product, there's no problem there, because this system is going to draw out of you what you need to create your first product. And in particular, something that you can leverage even if you do go back to work when this whole pandemic thing and lockdown is over. As long as you have some sort of skills that lead to results that is considered valuable for other people, you can use those skills, and in under 30 days. So yes, I know that that's a big promise, but I'm promising you that it will also be easy. It's not going to be complicated. This is also not limited to health. Just because I'm a doctor and I work with healers, I see some of you in architecture and graphic design, other things like that. A textile artist who is doing wearable art and now doing keto and fasting. All right, so bioenergetics, all of those things, I'm going to show you how you can start reaching more people. All right? And even if you've never considered yourself to be an entrepreneur, if you're a worker bee working in a company, this can also help you leverage your wisdom and skills so that you can up-level, whether that's within that company or being swooped up by someone else. So I'm going to share that with you. So if you stick with me until the end, I am going to share these slides with you so that you can actually have them. There is the worksheet that you can find in the chat so that you can start to do the work with me. Now, first things first, I need your full attention. So I know it's tempting to keep doing other stuff, but I'm going to ask, get off of Instagram, close down email, put your phone on silent so that you can be fully present. Normally, when I do these kinds of trainings that are private, it's thousands of dollars a day that people pay me to do these things, to help their teams or to help their executives or to help these emerging brands. And I'm giving it to you for free and, no strings attached, but I would like you to be fully present so that you can get the good value out of this. All right? So you might be wondering who I am. If you haven't ever tuned in before to any of my lives, I am Dr. Andrea Pennington. I am the managing director for Make Your Mark Global. And I help soul conscious coaches, healers, and lightworkers share their knowledge with the world. And I do that through publishing, crafting TED Talks, courses, products, and everything that I do is with a global impact. And the way that I do that is with personal branding, content development, publishing, and media production, including documentary films, as well as lightworker activation and mentoring. All right, sound exciting? Well, for me it is. I am actually living my dream. I am actually using all of my skills. You might have noticed that that's kind of a weird combination, right? How many other doctors do you know that are doing that kind of a thing? I don't know, but that's what I'm up to in the world. And I can tell you that for me, I have the greatest amount of freedom because I can work anywhere there is Wi-Fi. And yes, there are times here in France where the Wi-Fi is not that great, but I'm able now to work with this global business from the south of France, and I'm generally traveling all over the world. And I'm able to do that based on the information that I'm going to share with you today. So I want you to just imagine what it would be like. Like, imagine if you had none of this panic, but a sense of peace and a sense of freedom to know that you could bring forth what's naturally inside of you out in a way that it can help people, where it can actually be having an impact. That's what I want for you. Now, believe me, it wasn't always that way for me. When I say maybe you're like still a worker bee, well, that I was in that situation as well. When I first got out of medical school, I went to Georgetown University Hospital in Washington, D.C. And there I was doing what all medical residents do, working 80 to 100 hours a week. This was back before they prevented you working 100 hours a week. It was brutal. And at the time, working in the hospital, always being around sick kids, it was, because I was in pediatrics at first, it was kind of drudgery. And I struggled because I really wanted to do more, but in the confines of a hospital, there was a lot of limitations. And for those of you who've seen my TED Talks or know my work, I am now all about self-love and resilience. And I really enjoy teaching and helping people tune in to what their truth is. And in the hospital situation, that wasn't like the way things were set up at that time. Now, for me, I always had this dream of being able to inspire people and empower people and help them achieve their goals and all of that sort of thing. And it really wasn't possible. But one of the things that kind of kept me going as I was driving in to the hospital every day. So I lived in Maryland, just over the DC line, and I would drive down through Rock Creek Park into Washington, DC. And the one thing that I could see as I was driving in was that globe. The Earth, that's the Discovery Channel logo. And for me, I had this dream, as I was driving to the hospital, 5 a.m, I would see that globe and I was like, whoa, wouldn't it be so cool if I could work for Discovery? For me as a creator, as a creative person, especially with all that I was doing in my early life, it was like, whoa, that would be a dream, to work at Discovery Channel. But be that as it was, I continued working in the hospital until I got to a point where I was really frustrated. And I see some of you are, I see that Britt Byrne has said that there's no connection. Please know that we are doing this multi-streaming thing, just to briefly say. You may have to refresh your page so that things come back up. So if anything drops, right now I can see that my streaming software tells me I'm still going. So you may have to pop over to YouTube or watch on Facebook or on our private site. So let me know in the chat that if you can still hear me. Are you still here, or am I alone talking to myself in this little room? Type in the chat. Y'all here? Hello? 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 Uh-oh. I don't see anything. Thank you, Crystal. I will continue. So thank you. Facebook's back on. Okay, great. So there I was working at this hospital in DC. And one of the things that you've probably also noticed about me, if you haven't tuned in, well, you're going to get a little insight into the way my brain works. I have grown up with this sense of kind of always feeling like I had to prove myself. I was the youngest of 3 kids. My dad discouraged me from doing all the artsy stuff. There was a real emphasis on education. And then when I went to medical school, it was that same really intensity about being the best, always knowing your stuff. And one of the things I'm good at is I'm good with my hands. I'm good at doing technical things. And in particular, maybe it's because I'm an empath, maybe because of the sensitivity, I don't know, but I can feel blood vessels. And at the time, as I said, I was doing pediatrics. So I was able to like start IVs on little tiny babies when nobody could see a vein, they couldn't feel a vein. I was really good at it. And I worked with the residents, to always watching the best techniques. And I got really good at doing spinal taps. I know this sounds a little weird, but I was really good at it. And one of the things that you're good at it, besides being able to get the needle between the spine and into the spinal fluid, and when it starts dripping into the test tube, if you've had kind of a shaky hand or you hit a blood vessel too long, you get blood into the test tube. And that's not great because the people in the laboratory, they're going to be seeing all this blood and these blood cells. So what you ultimately want is something that we used to call a champagne tap, because the cerebrospinal fluid kind of looks like the color of champagne, especially if you have very little blood in it. And so they had this thing for the residents where I was going to med school, and then, yes, also at Georgetown University Hospital. If you could do a spinal tap and it have less than 3 blood cells when the laboratory gave you the results, then they would call that a champagne tap. And you were entitled to a bottle of champagne, which I never drank, but I was still so competitive. I wanted to be really good at it. And I was really good at it. And I had 3 or 4 bottles of champagne in my refrigerator to give at parties. Anyway, one day I was on call, and that's when you stay overnight at the hospital. And then this little tiny baby was brought in who was very, very sick and totally dehydrated, and had already been to the pediatrician the week before, and they just didn't know what was wrong. They thought it was just a viral thing. Baby was just not getting better, wasn't even keeping food down. So the baby was brought into the hospital, and I was the resident in charge. And so that night I had to perform a spinal tap. And I remember doing it, and I was so careful. I had to totally reassure the parents, because you can imagine for a parent, the idea of a needle going into the spinal canal, it freaks them out. So I totally reassured them, totally told them that they were in the best hands possible, that me and my team were going to do a great job, and I knew I had skills. And sure enough, I kept the little baby calm and safe, did the lumbar puncture, and when I looked at the test tube, I was like, oh yeah, this is going to be another champagne tap. And we sent it to the lab. All right, so it's in the middle of the night. So sorry guys, I see that the original links are not working and some people are waiting in another room. Okay, I'm gonna ask Sarah if you could look on YouTube. There are probably multiple versions of this live stream. These are one of the tech issues that I'm not 100% happy about with Restream. So Sarah, if you're with us, Thank you. Because there's probably 2 live streams and people need to find the right one. Thank you. Thank you, Fandy, for letting us know. All right, so we do this spinal tap on this tiny baby. We send it to the lab. I go to sleep for like 2 hours in the hospital. And the next morning, on rounds, I'm up and I'm going to the computer to get my lab results. One, to kind of be able to brag and say, hey, I got another champagne tap. But most importantly, I needed to be able to give the family the update on what was going on. I'm sorry for the confusion, my friends, but welcome. You haven't missed much. Relax, you're with us, and you will still get all of the goodness that you need for this intellectual property piece. All right, so I'm just bringing you up to speed to a turning point of when I realized that I had to break free from being a worker bee, following everyone else's rules and regulations, to getting to the freedom that I have today. And here's where it happened. That morning, when I went to the computer, the lab said that there were no results. And I was like, let me call them. I said, hey, I'm calling about baby Lala. Tell me, what's the deal? I can see the blood report, but I don't see the cerebrospinal fluid. Where's it at? Where are the results? And sure enough, they didn't have it. And I was beyond furious. Now, at that point, I'm not trying to badmouth, but we had some major issues at that hospital at that time. Now, this was 1999 when I was doing my medical training, and there were major issues at that hospital. And I remember going on rounds, and I said to my attending physician, you're not going to believe what happened. I'm going to have to go in there and tell these parents that the lab lost the cerebrospinal fluid. I'm going to have to repuncture their child, their little baby, again, just to get the spinal fluid to find out what's going on, what kind of infection is making this baby so sick. And do you know what? My attending physician, as he's eating a bagel, goes, that damn lab. Like, he showed no empathy, no concern, not for the family and not for me. It was just like he had become so numb to the fact that that lab and that hospital had such issues at that time. I'm not saying they do now. I do not want any lawsuits, but at that time there were issues. And that was the moment that I was like, I cannot stand by this anymore. Because as a young physician, I recognized I was like the hero. I wanted to go in and save people. I wanted to be able to, do all of this amazing things for the world. And then I realized that our good intentions as young doctors are nice, but they're not lined up with reality. And I really did get to a point after that year in that particular department. I was like, this is not for me. I love helping people. I love being in healthcare, but this system is not working and it's not in alignment with me. I was furious. I was getting depressed. I was super irritable. And that's when I had to make a decision. And it was a tough decision. And maybe you're in the same position now. Maybe this pandemic, being on lockdown, maybe losing income, has also forced you to start thinking about your decisions. For me, I realized I couldn't stay in that environment because it was not in alignment with my values. Now, we talked about values yesterday and in our first deep dive. Your values are what make you you, and they're what motivate you to take action. And in that case, the reason I got into healthcare wasn't being fulfilled in that hospital setting. And so this was one of those moments. It was a very pivotal moment. And yes, Tammy, it was indeed frustrating. And yes, Rossi, I can imagine that it was frustrating in your training as well. And yes, it was sad. And Raj, you said you wished you'd realized that and had the courage soon after residency. Well, one of the things that just happens to be my nature, maybe it is because I'm a highly sensitive empath, when things get under my skin, when there's a breach of values for me, I just can't put up with it. I can't like hide it. And so I decided that I was going to take a year off. And that's what I did. I took a year off from medicine, and I happened to get picked up by an internet startup company, which was very interesting for me because I didn't realize just how much I had this entrepreneurial thing. Because at the time, I didn't know what kind of work I was going to do. So when I found that job offering, it was like, okay, well, let's see what we can do. Sorry, I'm just sending out a quick text. All right, so one of the things that I realized then is as I started working with this other company, I was working with these startup entrepreneurs who'd come out of Wharton, and they were all smarty pants. And this was at the beginning of what we called then e-health. This was just as WebMD came on the scene. And for those of you who don't know WebMD, it was one of the first premier web platforms for the general public to get health information. And so I was creating health information on the web and in these kiosks that went into doctors' offices. And I got to create these animations and these videos. So leveraging my past experience in TV from university, I was creating these videos that went on these kiosks, and people could look at it, get health information, even do their informed consent on the kiosk directly. And it was at one point that I was sent to a health conference. And at this e-health conference, it was a big, expo room. And I was working at our little station with our kiosks and the website. And on a break, I decided to walk through the conference hall to see who else was there. And once again, I saw that globe. That same Discovery Channel globe. And at the time, I was kind of like, what is Discovery Channel doing at an e-health conference? Like, that didn't make any sense to me. So I went over to the little kiosk and looked, and I was like, so why are y'all here? What's Discovery got to do with this? And it was at that moment that they explained that they had just launched a health channel. So I don't know about you guys with the law of attraction. When I'm asking you to envision and imagine what's possible, don't go saying it ain't possible just because you don't see it right now. Because for years, driving into the hospital, looking at that globe, that Discovery Channel globe, and saying, oh, wow, wouldn't it be a dream to work at Discovery? Well, as I'm standing there talking to this woman, Christy, she said, what do you do? She saw my little badge. She saw that I had an MD after my name. And I said, well, I am the chief medical officer for this company, and we create videos and animations going into doctors' offices and on the web. And she said, really? We're looking for a medical director. And I was like, excuse me? She's like, yeah, in particular, we want someone who has experience in TV, as well as internet, as well as health. Like, talk about a USP, that's me. I had managed the TV station at university before going to med school. I was now working in e-health, and I was an MD. And so sure enough, I was hired by Discovery Channel. And I was hired as their medical director and came on board. And in my mind, I was thinking, this is great. I'm going to be on TV. I'm going to be hosting shows. I'm going to have a documentary. I'm like, but no. When I got there, the head of production was like, you look too young to be a doctor. No one's going to believe you're a doctor if we put you on TV. And I was devastated. But it was like, okay, I've heard that before. Being the youngest, it was always like a thing. Oh, you're the baby of the family. And okay, I'm not going to cry and whine about it because there is a turning point, as you can probably understand. After a year of being at Discovery Channel, where I was overseeing the content on the website, I was recruiting other physicians to work with us. I started helping with script development for other shows that were coming on. And then there was a changing of the guard. There was a new president who came to Discovery Health Channel. And I remember sitting down with him for the very first day, and he said, "You know, I have some ideas for your role here." And I was kind of like, "Okay, what?" And he said, "I'd like for you to anchor the news." And I thought, I'm finally getting my chance. And so, sure enough, I'm going to show you. I have to show you. Yeah, that's me. Way back when Discovery Channel made me their spokesperson and I anchored the health news. And then soon thereafter, this is what happened. So, yeah, thank you for the kind words in the chat. So, by having that new president come on who really took me under his wing and said, "This is the vision that I have," he even, after doing the news for just a short period of time, said, "Oh, okay, I have something new for you. I want you to host your own show." And that was how I got my very first TV show. And the way that all relates to you all sit here today is about this idea of intellectual property. So, first of all, just tell me in the chat, how many of you even know what the words intellectual property stands for? Can you type that in? What do you think of when you think IP or intellectual property? And Audrey, you remember me from all those years back? Uh, so tell me, what do you think intellectual property is? Because I can tell you, for me at Discovery Channel, one of the cool things about that job is that I started helping other hosts, people who'd come to the network. We ended up getting like 100 pitches a year for people who wanted to do a documentary or a show. And I got to help these new emerging talent turn on this whole thing about branding, like creating the website that went along with, that accompanied the TV show. So we were one of the first people that had these little links between what you saw on TV and then what was on the website. We created these things called fan sites way back in the day, like language that doesn't even exist anymore. And so this is what shifted for me, was starting to see how these people were taking their wisdom and turning it into products. First it was on TV, and then it was on the website, and then some of them were getting stuff into stores. And it was like, oh, this is a whole thing. This isn't just about, oh, my ego, I want to be like a TV star. This was a way to really extend their presence. And so the interesting thing is, even though these were just regular people, I mean, I worked with them from the very beginning. They weren't stars. Some of them did go on to become stars. You know, some of you know Dr. Oz. You saw him in that clip. Well, he got his start, his big start, through Discovery Health Channel, our network, which, by the way, Discovery Health Channel has now become the Oprah Winfrey Network, but we'll get to that in a minute. So even though I was seeing these people who were coming in, they were just regular people like you and me. They weren't like superheroes, but I never actually thought that I would end up doing what they were doing. I was still kind of in that worker bee mindset because I'd been dreaming of being at Discovery for so long. It was just like, oh, this is so cool. I'm working on this cool stuff. And I didn't actually make the shift to imagine me doing what I was helping these other people do. And probably because one of the things that was challenging about all of this was just because that president said he could envision seeing me on TV, I still had to work with the head of production, who at first was like, "You're too young. No one's going to believe you're a doctor." I had to work with the production guy. And so he hired someone to come and do my makeup and teach me to do my hair. They even hired a coach for me who taught me how to deliver the news with a very newsy tone, which still persists to this day. But it was interesting because one of the things that he said to me when I started to get all the TV stuff is he said, "Listen, you're one of us. You're on the inside. So don't start acting like you're talent." And in the business, talent means the star, the one that you have to ask, "Is your water cool enough? Do you need anything? Shall we powder your nose?" So he made it very clear, like, just because you're on TV, don't be acting like you're a star. And of course, that just played all into my insecurities that I already had from childhood about being the youngest and always feeling I had to prove myself. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to follow along and do exactly what I'm told. And I know that some of my people in Scandinavia, you know what I'm talking about. This was my version of Janta law. And for those of you who don't know, the law of Janta is kind of what we call tall poppy syndrome. Like, don't think you're getting too big for your britches. Like, you better stay humble, and you can't be bigger than anyone else. The tall poppy ends up getting chopped. And so it was a struggle, but obviously there's no wonder why I struggled. Like, all of these things were feeding into my insecurity, my desire to people please. And so I stayed in my lane. I did what I was told. And at one moment, I was asked to speak on behalf of the network. So when I was giving speaking engagements, it always was listed that I was the medical director of Discovery. Okay? So I'm giving this keynote speech, and I was sharing the 5 keys to living heart healthy. Of course, that was totally normal for me as a doctor, but they still had to check my talking points. So I literally had to sit down with the head of communication to make sure I was, saying nothing incorrect, which was completely silly. I'm like, this woman has no medical background. But anyway, that's another thing. So I give this keynote speech. It was a great success. And I think, oh, I'm going to put this on the Discovery Health website, right? So I go back to Discovery the next week, and I'm sitting down and I'm typing up this blog post. And some of you know the story. This is when I felt this presence over my shoulder, and it was this woman, Rita, and she said, "Hey, that's a book." And I was like, "No, I'm just writing a little blog here based on this talk that I just gave." And she said, "No, that's intellectual property right there. That's a book." Turns out, before she came to TV, she was working at a publishing company. So she knew how to structure books. And so when she saw that 5-step plan, she was like, "That's a book." Now I was like, who, me? Write a book? Why would anybody want to read my stuff? I mean, there's already Deepak and Wayne Dyer doing all the psychology stuff and, all of that. You know how that kind of role goes. You're like, who, me? Not me, little old me. Why would anybody want to read my stuff? And I said that to her. I said, there's Deepak already doing the integrative health thing, and there's Wayne Dyer. He's doing psychology in the way that I would probably teach it. And, Christiane Northrup at the time, she had it, women's health on lock. And that's when, yes, Raj, imposter syndrome, exactly. It was like, I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough. But she said this to me. She said, "Andrea, it's true that you may have a similar message to all of those other people, but you are a different messenger. You have a different voice. You have a different way of delivering it. Your stories are different. And some people, they are not going to be able to relate to those other people, those other experts you're talking about. And anyway, when it comes to health, people can't get enough information to get healthy." And that's when my mind opened to this idea that maybe I too could be contributing as I'd always dreamt of in a bigger way. So that whole feeling of inadequacy, all of that self-talk, I realized all of that stuff, it wasn't true. It was a big lie that I wasn't good enough or as good as. And that's what many of us have experienced over our lives, whether it came from our family or it was perpetuated by society or initiated by our peers. The reality is, it's not true. None of that idea about you have to be perfect or you're not, it's not true. The reality is, you're not meant to be like anybody else. Everyone has their own path. We have our own soul destiny. You came here to live your mission. I came to live my mission. And we're not meant to be copycats. So when you see what I'm talking about here, I'm talking about the authentic personal branding system, not being a fake or a copycat. So just wanted to give you that sense of that, because once I realized that she was right, that's when everything changed for me. I took that book concept and I went home, and in the evenings and weekends, I was writing. I was conceptualizing, wow, well, if I did write, I just said if I were to write a book, how would I tell this information? What is really possible? So if you remember from Deep Dive 1, our first video lesson here, we talked about your philosophy, how you see the world, and what's possible if we were to get on board with you. And so I took that on. I was like, well, what is possible? Could I? And I started writing. And what was cool was things just started moving. My confidence started increasing. And that's when I got the call to be on the Oprah Winfrey Show. And the first time I was on, I was so nervous. I mean, that's a whole conversation for another day. But after that first appearance, the president of the network pulled me aside and said, you look like you were holding your own. And it just sort of gave me that additional sense that, okay, you can do this now, go on and fly. And so when I got the second call from Oprah's producers, they sent a team to my wellness center in the DC area, and we shot several segments in my wellness center. And then they flew me and my mom to Chicago, and we shot an episode there. And that was pivotal for me, because at that moment, the head of communication at Discovery came and she was like, I guess I really don't have anything to say about your talking points, because for that TV show, I should explain, the show was about how nutrition can help us prevent things like diabetes and heart disease. This was right after Luther Vandross suffered a stroke. He was still alive at the time. He was in the ICU in a coma. And so, of course, the head of communications was not going to be able to check my talking points. So I felt empowered the second time I was on Oprah. Not the first time, but the second time it was like, I got this. I'm going to go and do me. And that's what happened. And that ultimately led to my first book, The Pennington Plan: 5 Simple Steps for Achieving Vibrant Health, Emotional Well-Being, and Spiritual Growth. And I've said this before, but it was endorsed by Wayne Dyer and Christiane Northrup. So talk about being tuned into what is possible. And all of that came through shifting my mental chatter. And it was definitely because of these powerful mentors that I was willing to listen to. So that's why I'm doing all these deep dives for free, to support you, to pay it forward for all of the gifts that I've gotten through having these amazing mentors. It completely changed my life. And then what it allowed me to do was, in my wellness center, I created a weight loss program. Now, of course, there are lots of doctors doing weight loss, but I started doing it in my special way. And pretty soon we had, a steady flow of clients coming in, people being recommended to come to us from all over the world. At that point, my biggest loser, as we called him, this was before the TV show, The Biggest Loser, was this guy who weighed over 500 pounds. And coming through our program, he didn't want to have surgery, the gastric bypass. He couldn't do any of the stimulants to, appetite suppressant drugs because of his condition. He had a 12-year history of type 2 diabetes. He came through our program and he lost 250 pounds. He reversed his type 2 diabetes. He got off of insulin. And when he went back to his doctors at Howard University Hospital, they were like, what is that Pennington doing over there? Like, how did this? So I know Fernando is on, who's also been helping people reverse type 2 diabetes. But at the time, this was a concept that people were like, that's not even possible. Yeah, it is. So all of this was like part of this process that helped me realize that the way I see things in my own unique way and the way I deliver them has value. And it's the same thing with you. And believe me, it doesn't matter if you don't have some degree or some certification. As long as you know how to get results for people, this system that you're going to learn today about intellectual property can work for you. I eventually shifted and started doing work with addiction because as my center grew, people were saying, okay, I've got a patient for you. They've got obesity, but they're not your typical. They have an eating disorder. So then we started having people come in with eating disorders and addiction. So I went and got additional training. You can do the same. If you have an interest in this particular area, dust off your skills. You can become a coach. You can become so many things. Well, I got additional training in trauma, and which went perfectly with my background as an acupuncturist, because I was able to help people from a mind, body, spirit, even environmental approach. And then I started being asked to speak at different conferences, and I was showing up really, teaching how you can do this holistic approach to eating disorders and addiction. And that's what led me to kind of take a step back when I started being asked to speak. So it's the same thing with you. And I know I got an email from someone saying, what do I have to do to be interviewed by you? I'm going to reply to your email, but here's my answer, and here's my answer to everyone here. If you wanted to be interviewed by a big podcaster or get on TV or have some feature in the newspaper, you would need to go through this exact process that we're going through today. What is your unique take on some problem in the world? Now, it doesn't matter if you solve it in a similar way to someone else, because all of your unique attributes, your mission, your message, your methodology, your voice, your vibe, your personality, your strengths, your skills, all of that makes you unique. And that's the way you're going to be able to get stuff out there into the world without it feeling like it's competition. And so that's what led me to create the Cornerstone process, which is included in the Real Self-Love Handbook. When I started taking people through this process of resolving their childhood trauma, reprogramming, just like I had to, reprogram the subconscious mind and get to a place of real self-love, what came out of it was this 5-step process. And so that's what I started to teach. I started to teach it on stages. And it was doing incredibly well. But with all that success, I still wasn't happy. And the reason for that is working in the media at that time was very constricting. Having someone who felt that they had to check my talking points and knowing that if I went anywhere on other stages and other TV networks, because eventually I was being asked to speak on other TV networks, not just Discoveries. I was on other networks, but I always had to be listed as medical director. And I started to feel like this is very limiting, because even though I was discovering on my own in my medical practice that there was a whole other way to heal, to treat disease, to even prevent disease, they were not receptive to it. Now, of course, that's different now, but imagine way back then. This was over 15 years ago. People weren't open to being on TV with my title as a medical director and talking about holistic healing. It was foreign to them. In fact, when I opened my wellness center, there were people that said, shouldn't you be opening this in California with all those, crunchy woo-woo new age people? But little by little, I started to gain this confidence because I had seen results with my clients. And I ended up meeting this physician. Another pivotal moment for me was meeting the late Dr. Alan Mintz. Alan was publishing some content online about nutrition and hormone optimization and how it was helping people like get their hemoglobin A1C down and prolong their health and vitality. And he was introducing this concept called age management, or some people call it anti-aging. In age management, the whole focus is on prevention, but not waiting till you're a geriatric patient in your 70s, 80s, and 90s. It's like, what if you started early in life optimizing nutrition, sleep, fitness, your outlook, your environment, and supplementing your hormones if needed, supplementing with nutritional supplements where needed. And so I called him one day. I was like, I'm going to call this place up. And he answered the phone. Now, this was Cenogenics Medical Institute. And I'm like, he's like, yeah, this is a place where we actually take personal calls, because he was introducing a whole new paradigm of personalized medicine. And this concierge style of medicine where people pay one fee and they get everything covered. Well, that to me was revolutionary. I went back to Discovery and I was like, I've just found this article and this article on how vitamin C does this and meditation does this. And da-da-da-da. I was coming up with such revolutionary things for me based on when I went to medical school. And the people at Discovery were like, And that's when I realized, no, this is once again too conflicting with my values and too confining. I felt like I was once again in this box. And what made it worse was Discovery Health Channel. When we started off, we were in like 25 million homes on cable. By the time I had my own show and was anchoring the news and hosting a bunch of documentary films, we were in 80 million homes. So to put that in perspective, the American cable homes at that point were just under 100 million. So if you had a basic cable, you had me on TV multiple times a day. And because I had my own show, Amazing Baby Videos, and I anchored the news, and then in the primetime evening section, I was also hosting. And so what happened was, eventually I was noticed and recognized on the street. Now you may think that sounds glamorous to be, ooh, you're recognizable. No, because the reality was they were recognizing me as the girl they saw on TV. And she wasn't me. She was this brand that we constructed based on all of these very constricting and limiting external forces. So the reason I'm always pressing you to become an authentic personal brand based on you is because it is not sustainable the other way. In my case, again, I know I'm a weirdo. I don't like feeling that I'm being forced or pressured to not express my true self. It didn't work for me. I ended up with depression and anxiety. I had this feeling like I was a fake. So let alone before, when I already felt like an imposter, I felt even worse because now I had created this brand image that didn't fit me. Is this making sense? I'm sorry to deviate, but I want you to get the sense of why it's necessary for you to focus on doing you and not being a copycat, because it's not sustainable. And in my case, that's exactly what happened. I ended up getting to a point where I didn't want my career and I didn't even want my life. Now, if you've seen the TED Talk, you know I wasn't suicidal, but I did not want my life the way it was anymore. Waking up with that sense of dread and anxiety and depression, it was too constricting. And it was in 2005 that I was not far from here in Caen, the south of France, where I had an out-of-body near-death experience. I'll save that story. You can watch the TED Talk. But it was that experience where I left my body and reconnected with my higher self and really understood why I was depressed. I was depressed because I had made all of these decisions, even though they were unconscious decisions, it was those decisions that led me to that place of misery and depression. And when I recognized that and I understood that I could have made different choices, you mean it's me I get to choose, not my mama, my daddy, my society, or the American Medical Association? That was when I had that awakening. That was when I realized I am not going to live a lie anymore. And what made it easier was I became pregnant. And I knew for a fact that I was not going to be living some sort of a lie or some double life, because then I knew that that would be what my daughter would recognize. You know, we model for our children, and I wasn't going to do that. So it made it very easy for me to make that decision. And maybe this pandemic right now is forcing you to also say, I need to really go within and look at my values, and maybe I need to pivot and change some of my lifestyle or my choices to be more authentic and in alignment with who I really am. And that's what I did. And when I moved here to the south of France, I was just kind of an unknown. Nobody knew me. So it was like perfect. Nobody was like, oh, you're blah, 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 Dr. Andrea. Because at that point, very few people in Europe had seen Discovery Health, and even Oprah, you know. A few people had maybe seen me on CNN International when I did a few spots, but other than that, no. But what was interesting is as I started doing networking events here on the Riviera and in Monte Carlo, I started meeting people who were asking me, oh, you've done that? You've done a book, you've done this TV, you've done speaking, and you ran a center, and they were like, how did you do that? How? So I started this little consulting, just helping people here. Word of mouth was how it grew. And then eventually I met some people who said, oh, you should go over to this event in the UK and over here in Iceland. And that's how things started kind of shifting for me. And then there was a moment when I was sitting in meditation and I felt this rumbling, this urge, this calling to do it again, to do TV again, to be on stages again. But this time, to really share what I really knew. Because at that point, I had been fully just living as my authentic self, doing Qigong and meditation and yoga all day. You know, like I was just bathed in all of this goodness of holistic healing and all of that. And it was at that moment that I said, okay, I feel this urge. It is the calling. But if I'm going to do this, I'm going to have to do it as the authentic me. That means I've got to rebrand myself, because I'm not going back and being that boring, buttoned up Dr. Andrea. That is not happening. So that was when I said, okay, so what's the best way to brand yourself on a global level? A TED Talk. I happened to be teaching at the International University of Monaco. I was teaching corporate brand management, television industry, and I was even teaching an applied positive psychology course. And I got this call, so a literal call, from one of our MBA grads who said she had just gotten the license for their very first TEDx. And yes, some of you have seen that TEDx. And that's what really started to set me free. Now, it's not my best public speaking thing. You can tell I was nervous. I was still a little more in my TV speaker role, but it was the first time that I came out and told the world my truth about living with depression and anxiety, about the fact that I'd had a near-death experience. And that is what set me free. And ultimately, it's what led me to start being called for multiple events. And so I want to give you just a sense of that and why it's important, because this is what's possible for you as well. So I started doing international events in Denmark. Ooh, that's going really fast. Expert Empires. You know this guy? I wish I could stop it, but somehow my keynote is on its own thing. Anyway, I got to be a headliner with Gary Vaynerchuk at Expert Empires in the UK. For those of you who don't know Gary V, he's gone on to create, an immigrant to the United States. So for those of you who say, oh, but wait, I'm just a little person starting out. He came from an immigrant family, started off doing a little web show, and now has a 150 million a year media business and is advising young and old people on how to do their marketing. So doing these international events ultimately got me back on Dr. Oz. So when I was living here, they flew me back to America, to New York, to do his show again. But I didn't even show you clips of the first time I was on his show. I was still a little more timid. And then I ultimately started doing podcasts and radio shows. Maybe some of you saw this one. It's on YouTube and iTunes and all that with Dr. Mark Hyman. He is the host of something called The Doctor's Pharmacy, getting hundreds of thousands of downloads every month. Also coming out as my authentic self, it led me to get involved in mastermind groups. So for those of you who are into law of attraction, Marie Diamond at one point had moved to the south of France, and we connected. I hosted her on one of my big summits, and then she invited me to be a part of the Association for Transformational Leaders, which then opened me up to even more things. So I started expanding my reach beyond the Riviera. I participated in a group book, this one here called Heart to Heart, The Path to Wellness. And then, yes, I gave multiple TED Talks, including the most recent one, which, is kind of like the scariest one. I thought the first one was my scariest TED Talk, but this one right here, where I actually sang live on the TED stage, that was kind of a big deal. All right, so people were starting to ask me to speak on other stages, and they were asking me what I bet you are also curious about now. How did you do it? Because I'm one of those people that takes a step back and analyzes exactly what happened so that we could reproduce it. Just like I was reproducing success for people at Discovery Channel, I got picked up by a company called Lux TV, and for 4.5 years I was doing global luxury reporting and lifestyle reporting for them. And ultimately, that has led me to publish my own books, to start a publishing company, running multiple courses, my own podcasts, my own radio shows, my own mastermind groups, and even a mentoring academy, a 12-month Global Luminary academy. And the thing I'm most excited about right now is this documentary film that we're working on, which is the top 10 traits of resilience. So how did I do all of this? How can you follow this same roadmap? And it doesn't matter if you don't want to go global. It doesn't matter if you don't want to be on TV or stages. No matter what you want to do, if you'd like to start pivoting and profiting from your intellectual property, this is how I did it. So on deep dive number 1, we covered how to create your personal brand. Well, when I took a step back and looked at how did we do this at Discovery Health Channel? How did I do this with other brands? How did I build that first $1 million company? It was exactly like this. So the first one is the call to vision. Now, this is very reminiscent of the hero's journey. Sorry, guys, I studied film. What are you going to do? The hero's journey was based on a book by Joseph Campbell, The Hero with 1,000 Faces. And when I was studying film, we analyzed every sort of film out there, just like Joseph Campbell did. And he not only looked at films, but also novels and fairy tales and fables from around the world and across cultures. And what Joseph Campbell identified is that we each go through this very easy to reproduce process of a discovery, a journey. And that hero's journey starts off with the call. And that calling leads you to a vision. So you heard about this for me. I was driving into the hospital and I saw what was in my vision, that globe, that Discovery Channel globe. And I started to imagine what would life be like if I could work at Discovery. So when I ask you to imagine what it would be like for you, I want you to be able to do the same thing. Start imagining, because it's from your vision, it's from your imagination that you will start to create a blueprint for the universe to start sending you these things, all right? So the first step was the call to vision. When I looked at all the other authors and TV personalities that I worked with, and then started working with other movie stars and superstars, it all started with a call. And then stage 2 is position. This is what we've been talking about for the last 2 deep dives. In the position stage, it's all about defining your brand identity. So if you haven't seen those, register for this deep dive series, and you'll get access to the replays, the masterclass slides, and the worksheets. And you'll see that I take you through this system. Again, this is exactly what I did at Discovery Channel for other people. I take you through the system of figuring out your unique selling proposition, what your MVPs are, and that helps you to create this brand identity. And then you start building a platform. And the platform is just your base. It's the foundation from which you can spring forth and start creating a business. Make sense? And then the third stage is the presentation stage. And this is where you really start to establish your credibility in the marketplace. So establishing your credibility, elevating your prestige, this is where you start to differentiate yourself from everyone else. This is not you saying, I'm a coach, I'm a Reiki practitioner, I'm an SEO expert. Those are too bland, because then you're just like everyone else out there. But as soon as you start to present what makes you unique, and this is what we're talking about today, your intellectual property is what makes you unique. The way that I taught weight loss was unique to me, and that's what allowed me to build the successful business. That's what we're going to do for the rest of our session today. Then in stage 4, it's the promotion stage. So for those of you who have asked, how do I get on TV? Why didn't they call me back? I sent my stuff out. I'm just as good as everyone else. Then I would ask you to go back down and look at the first 3 stages. Have you really accomplished all of those things? Because if you haven't, then you ain't got no business trying to be on TV. It will flop. And I've seen it happen. There have been many times when people have gotten on a big show and it did nothing for their business because they didn't have the other elements in place. And the 5th and final stage of this ascension process is called expand. And this is where you are a global luminary. That's what I call them. I don't call them superstars. You are a global luminary when your presence can be seen around the world. You are a recognizable brand or a figure, and your warmth is felt. It comes through everything that you're doing. You are glowing globally. So that is precisely how I did it and how I'm helping my clients and helping you do it as well. So those are the 5 stages. Now, this is my IP. Yes, other people teach probably very similar steps and stages, but not in the way I do. This is part of my intellectual property. So I saw that some of you put into the chat that you are, I'm going to start looking. I'm so glad that this is giving you clarity. Yippee! Yes, amen to that. Clarity is a good thing. So let's see. Before we move into the next section, I'm going to check on some of your comments here. I know I've been running my mouth. I hope that you're getting a sense of why, because everything I've shared in this story is going to relate to you and relate to this process. I promise. It was not just me. Well, do you think it was just me bragging? Was it? Was it? All right. So let's see. Let's see if I can see some of your definitions. Who has told me what? Okay. So Jen, one of the things that you said when I asked, what is IP? What is intellectual property? You said ideas you can monetize. That is, an idea you can make money from. And Kati, yes, an inner knowing. Absolutely right. Intellectual property is your knowledge. And Raj says, intellectual property, something that you create from your own intellect. It comes from your own creativity. Absolutely. And yes, Steve, intellectual property can also include photos. Crystal says, I think IP is the combo of knowledge, experience, and wisdom. Absolutely. Absolutely. Alex says, information that only you possess. Shelley says, I think of proprietary resources that you can create which have legal protection from duplication and can produce passive and or residual income. And yes, Jen, and you can scale it. Back in my hospital days, back in my medical practice, I was limited. Now I did start doing groups. So our weight loss groups, we got a bunch of people into groups. They got their acupuncture. I led them in guided meditation, and then they came to group classes. They still had one-on-ones with the psychiatrist, and they had one-on-ones with me, but we started to scale by going into group formats. So that was awesome. So Raj is asking, did I go back to medicine afterwards? And did I ever beat myself up for not being able to fit into that system? I did beat myself up in the very beginning, only because I was a good little soldier. I wanted to fit in and be, good like everyone else. But once I started getting into all the meditation stuff and I realized compassion was what I needed, especially as I started treating trauma, because there was something that happened. I realized even though I didn't end up with an eating disorder or addiction, I had the same kind of mental stuff going on as some of my patients. And so what I recognized in my clients was, it wasn't everyone, but some of the people I was treating had like zero self-love. They were perfectionistic, beating themselves up. They didn't feel good about themselves. They never felt like they were enough. And that completely resonated because I felt that way. What was different was the way they decided to cope. Some of them ate, some of them shopped, some of them became abusive or violent, and some of them, yes, used drugs and alcohol to cope with that feeling. What I did was I went into trying to be better and all of this perfectionism and achieving accomplishments after accomplishments. And so once I tuned into this work of compassion and mindfulness, I realized, oh, we all go through some version of this. And the idea of trying to fit into a system that wasn't designed for me is foolishness. It's foolish for all of us. And we don't need to keep perpetuating that. In fact, I'm calling for people to put a stop to that, including with your children. So no. All right, so getting back to the question, intellectual property. IP, says Kaya, a unique set of skills based on knowledge and experience that one can leverage for gain. Yes, so you can make money from your ideas. And Lena says, something unique you can create that defines what you do. It needs to be protected because it makes a difference in your field, and you should take credit for it. Yes, amen. All right, absolutely. All right, so good. So you guys have a good sense of that. All right, still scrolling through these comments. For those of you who are tuning in for the first time, welcome. I am your host, Dr. Andrea Pennington. You're tuned into 6 days of deep dive training, business training on personal branding, course creation, product launches, and even crafting your sales offers. Today is all about your intellectual property, how you can pivot to profit based on your wisdom, your information, and what makes you unique. Voila. So welcome. Thank you for being here. All right, so great. So it looks like I've gone through the majority of your comments. All right, IP is your MVPs. Tammy, you get a gold star. You get a woot woot. I'm going to give you, Tammy, for being such a star. You can choose. You can choose one of these 3 books behind me. Sarah Kate, Connect with Tammy, for recognizing that the IP is her MVPs, and I will send you a book. And if you don't want it physically because of fears of COVID, then I'll give you the digital. So wonderful. All right, guys. So I'm going to get back into teaching. Please get your worksheets. Get your worksheet out. because now we're going to shift into you doing a little bit of work. All right? You better work. Sometimes you got to work. I want you to work it. Mainly because it's what I promised you. So I promised you that you would get this result, and the only way I can do it is if I do what I gotta do. All right, so here we go. All righty then. All right, so officially, intellectual property is a legal term for intangible property that is the result of creativity. These can be creations of the mind, such as inventions, ideas, literary or artistic works, designs, and this also includes symbols, names, and images. So I remember my first big endorsement deal was with Kellogg. I think that was one of my first ones. I did several of these kind of big deals when I was still at Discovery. And it was like, oh, they're licensing the right to use my name and my image. So this was a shift for me, like, wow, there's value in my name and my image and what I'm saying for this being represented for another company. So that is intellectual property. Now, there are 4 types of intellectual property that can be legally protected. And of course, Shelley threw out the legal stuff. I know someone else did too, but Shelley, I know she's a lawyer. So in her first professional career, the law was yo jam. And so there's 4 types of IP that are typically protected legally: patents, copyrights, trademarks, and trade secrets. And I saw somebody on here earlier who said that you're in architectural design. So even your architectural designs can be protected legally. So write that into your worksheet. That is specifically what intellectual property is. Make sense? Excellent. Excellent. So when we're talking about IP, we're talking about anything that comes out of your mind. It doesn't matter if somebody else does it too. The way that you do it is different. And that's the key here. So don't feel bad that you might be like someone else. You're still different, right? I've already driven that point home enough and enough. All right, so what kind of content and products should you offer, or could you offer? We're going to be leveraging your wisdom and expertise. So moving into this next phase of today's training. All right. Now, I know that some of you might say, well, wait a minute. This makes sense for you, Andrea. Of course, you're a doctor. You had like skills, you know, when I created the cornerstone process and later the attunement meditation and stuff. But it doesn't matter. Even if you don't have a degree, you don't have some training certificate, if you have wisdom or expertise that gets results, that creates valuable, tangible results in the world, if that came out of your brain, your heart, or maybe it might have even been a download from the divine, if you can get legit results, then you can leverage it by creating your own products. You just need a system, and that's why you're here. Here, we're going to go through step by step how you can create your own products. And so I have to introduce you to this lovely woman, Yvette Taylor. I know some of you already know who she is. Yvette is someone I met through Expert Empires, and she has a background very similar to mine. She was an acupuncturist. She had run a big health center. Then she was starting to do marketing. And when she was pregnant with her son, she really had one of those moments. Maybe it's the pregnancy trigger for us. That's like, I've got to be living my truth. But that was when she had her epiphany, and she decided that she really wanted to teach people what she knew about energy and the law of attraction. And so we helped Yvette take her knowledge and put it into this. Do you see how big this book is? It's 360 some odd pages. And if it had been a small book, it would have been over 400 pages. So we helped Yvette take the knowledge that she was already sharing with people on Facebook and in live events, which is great. She had moved from the one-to-one into one-to-many, and she was getting, great results. But now it's like, well, if people see this on Facebook, but they can't come to London, wouldn't it be wonderful if they could get it out of a book? And so we did. And sure enough, when her book launched, it shot to #1. And she was even able to share the book with one of her idols, another iconic brand that you probably know, Bruce Lipton. And so it doesn't matter if there are other people doing it, as long as you can create a system that is unique to your experience and your expertise, you can leverage that. Make sense? Now, we also helped her kind of break out of just the UK and start becoming an international speaker. So here she is when we were in Alicante, Spain, for an event called ETTG, which she's getting ready to teach again for the next version of ETTG, which happens to be online because, COVID, what are you going to do? So that's what's possible. And then there's the beautiful Delia Sanchez, who is also one of Yvette's EAM mentors. I neglected to mention that now Yvette is also training other people to become mentors in this technique called the energy alignment method. And that's how I was introduced to Delia. Delia also came to my event here in France called GLAY, the Global Luminary Activation Experience. And Delia is an expert in reinvention. So she's about to be very busy as people coming out of this lockdown are going to need to reinvent themselves, improve their CV and resume, and get new jobs or start new companies. But the interesting thing about her is that she is teaching about reinvention, leveraging the laws of the universe. And so you'll even see her you'll see her on Instagram, on Facebook, sharing La Ley de la Atracción. So all of her work is in Spanish. So she is actually going to be taking some of the materials from many of the people in my circle into Latin America. So it doesn't matter if you don't currently have a product, you just need a system. And if you're passionate about that system and you're willing to start getting out there and start sharing it with the world, you can totally do that. And so be on the lookout, because Delia is also, especially for you Spanish speakers, she's also hosting webinars and helping people learn about the law of attraction and how they can really tune into their values and what they want to create in their lives, so that when they are reinventing themselves, it's coming from a different, more empowered place. Does that make sense? And I know many of you are also highly sensitive individuals. And I shared yesterday in our deep dive about avatars, about your target audience, I shared that opening up about being highly sensitive, being an empath, it also resonated with certain people. As I was standing on these stages, I wasn't intending to confess that I'm a weirdo, but what was interesting is people started to come up and say, oh, what you mentioned up there, I got that too. So in other words, people were self-identifying as my kind of people. And when Willow started sharing with me some of the research that he's seen about how highly sensitive people, HSPs, which always had such a negative tone to it, HSPs are more likely to have a genetic trait that just gives them a deeper sense of sensory processing. And if we could embrace that and not see it as a bad thing, it could actually become a superpower. And in Willow's case, he's really inspired to help leaders become more empathic and leverage their sensitivity as a superpower. And in fact, I urged him to really take this on as a mission to lead a movement. And so now he's doing exactly that. He's leading the high sensory intelligence movement. So he's helping to shift the paradigm away from thinking of being a high sensory person as a negative thing, and instead recognizing it for what it is. We have high sensory intelligence. And one of the ways that he's doing is helping people identify that they have this sensory processing sensitivity. And so there's a quiz you can take if you go to his website, Inluminance. Maybe Sarah can pop it in the chat, inluminance.com. You can take a quiz to find out if you have this sensory processing sensitivity. And on May 12th, Willow is leading a class, a webinar, helping people understand how you can create your own course using his proprietary system. He's developed a 6-pillar approach to creating online courses based on your experience of your own transformation and the limiting beliefs that you had to get through to have your transition. So I'm going to explain that a little bit more, but I just want you to understand that what you'll see from both Willow and Delia, they're using the model where if you don't have a product, that's okay. You can build it and then test it at the same time. So in fact, what you'll see if you stick around with us for class number, it's tomorrow, deep dive number 4, we're going to explain exactly how you can choose which thing you want to focus on, how to test it, and how to create your first product and launch it in less than 30 days. And so Willow has a way of doing that leads you through his 6-pillar process. And the reason that's important is even if you don't have a lot of clients right now, maybe you don't have a lot of experience, well, you can invite people into a beta course. We did the same thing with Delia. She offered her special training program in a group setting, and now she's got some beta testers who've been able to experience her transformational coaching and give her feedback, and now she'll have testimonials as well. So does that make sense? Make sense to you all, my friends? My friends? Yes? So that's what's possible for us. We have this ability to actually create as we go. So I'm going to pop over now and have a look at your comments. And yes, Joanna, beautiful Joanna Suarez, you're seeing yourself in me? Yes. All right, so Jen asks, what about if you're teaching in a school? You thought that intellectual property would belong to them. Yes, if you happen to be creating a curriculum for a school, then if you're still employed by them, typically it's under a work for hire contractual situation. So you have to be careful and mindful of that. In my case, when I started teaching at the International University of Monaco, they asked me to teach a course called Be Who You Are, which was crazy because that's already what I was calling my approach, become who you really are. But because I had already worked out the cornerstone process and I'd already been through positive psychology training with Martin Seligman. So a lot of the stuff that I was going to be teaching in my style, I let them know up front, this is mine. I got dibs on this. Now, if that's not the case where you are, then you might want to not share that there, create it on your own so that you can copyright it before you go sharing it anywhere else in the world, because you would not want them to try to take your stuff, right? So yes, even though it is your unique take on the subject, if you're creating it under that contractual agreement, then it could potentially belong to them. I would say definitely talk to a lawyer about that. But the way that I would suggest is not delivering it in that format, in that school. What we're talking about now, I should say, my goal for you is to create something that becomes a sellable product. You can, of course, use this within an organization. And like I said, this can help you level up. Your manager, the directors of the company will start to see you as a much more valuable person if you're coming up with new stuff. But ultimately, I think what this pandemic is opening up for many people is the realization that we have an opportunity to own our brilliance and be able to leverage it no matter who our employer is. So, Jen, yours might be a special case. So I would ask you to just look into that. So let's see. So Fernando, did you get the worksheet? Hopefully you're getting them. Sarah is sharing all of that. And Jen, yes, I'm always coming up with new stuff. So keep it going, Jen. Like, don't stop. Can't stop, won't stop, don't stop. All right? So shall we walk through the process? So Jen says, you've already got lots of stuff coming up. Well, good. So now you've gotten a sense of what IP is, why it's important. You'll see on the worksheet here that I'm going to show you how you can actually leverage it to make a good deal of money. But first, on that worksheet, you'll see that there is this question: what are the problems that you solve that your clients also have? Or is there something that you know how to do that you could teach other people? So to start things off, I want you to start there. What are the problems that you solve? You've got some wisdom. I saw this great email come out from, I think it was it Brian Moran? I can't remember now. But he was giving this sort of case example. Zoom as a platform went from, I think, in the tens of millions of users to hundreds of millions of users based on this pandemic. And you know what's happened? A whole lot of folks who've never used Zoom are like, I'm so confused. How do I do this? And so he gave this example of, well, you have a skill if you happen to be one of the people who's been using Zoom for years, like a lot of people I know. Well, what if you created a small little business? It might be temporary, only for this pandemic, where you could train other people on how to use Zoom so that they can get up to speed really quickly instead of having to read all these help pages. Or what if you set up a business such that you could help struggling seniors who can't figure it out, and you go and you just set everything up for them. And all they have to do is just remember, click this button, then this button, then this button. So that may sound a little bit basic, but I want you to get that basic. Start thinking about, if you don't yet have a product or a methodology, start thinking about the skills that you have that you know people would pay for the results. Okay? I'm going to get to, Raj, your question in just a few minutes. So start thinking about what you know that you can teach other people. What results are you able to get people to? All right, so now I'm going to show you how it all works in my little crazy system. All right, so Willow does something very similar to this. Sorry, guys, we have a visitor once again. Lusa wants to be here in the mix. So what I want you to do is first draw a line on a piece of paper, and on the left of the line, write the word now, and on the right of that line or arrow, write the word then. Now represents the state that your ideal client is in. If you don't yet have clients, use yourself, because most likely whatever you're really good at, you've probably done it for yourself already. So in my case, a few years ago, I was like, oh, I want to become a global speaker again. I want to do this. And at that point, I was feeling that call, feeling that urge, a little bit frustrated. I knew what I didn't want to do. I didn't want to go back into that box of being told who I could be and how I could show up. So describe the now. And if you look at yesterday's avatar profile, you should be able to really clearly describe what your ideal client is in before they start working with you. And then you see those vertical lines across. What are each of the steps that a person needs to go through in order to get to the then side? So if they're overweight and they want to lose 50 pounds, that's the then. What are the steps they need to take? If someone is completely overwhelmed and so freaked out that they don't know how to create order and calm in their mind to even sit down and write a book or whatever it is, then what steps would they need to get through? Would you take them through, if that's your area of expertise, that would lead them then to a state of calm, productivity, joy? So in other words, we're talking about the before and the after. What is your client or ideal client in? What is their current state, the now? And what are the steps you'd have to take to get them to the then? So those steps are going to be eventually the modules for your program, or they're the sections of a speech. So you could literally use this to create your keynote speech, like I've done for my TED Talks and I've helped others. You're going to have a little more of a story arc. We can get into the art of delivering it on a separate call, but there are very clear steps that you would want to take your listener or your customer on. And then you're going to look at those steps and what are the significant milestones? What do they need to accomplish that allows them to know that they can check off, okay, I've made that step, made that step, made that step. So if you're not clear on this, I'm going to just show you another example. Now, you've already seen this, the 5 stages of business growth. So the now position is someone is in that calling stage. They're in that frustrated, I want to do something. I know I want to be a speaker. I know I want to get out there and get my message to the world. That first step is to create a blueprint. The way I suggest you do that is through a vision. Start looking at a vision of you performing at your best, utilizing all of your skills and talents. This is exactly what I did. It was how I manifested the Discovery Channel position because I imagined it in my mind. But it's also what I did when I moved here to France and I started thinking, all right, if I'm going to get back out there, what does it look like? Well, I'm definitely going to be speaking my truth. I want to be on stages, but I want to be as the real me, not always in some buttoned up, silly looking suit. I want to be natural. I want to feel free enough to talk about spirituality. So I literally created the blueprint based on my MVPs. And then it's the next step that you would take if you really wanted to be a global icon. I realized, oh, well, what did we do with all these people at Discovery? Well, we helped them figure out their brand identity. This is what I sat down with them to find out, okay, got it. This is what you showed in the TV show. All right, this is what led you to those discoveries on your own. All right, how do we bring those elements onto the website? So if people have seen the documentary, they're going to land on this mini site, this fan page, and really connect with you. So that's the second step that you need to get, right? And then the third step was, all right, well, now you're saying you want to be on bigger stages, you want to be on Oprah, you want to be on whatever, then you really need to establish your credibility. You need to elevate your prestige. You need to be super duper clear on who you are and what you stand for. Now, I see Joyous Beyond Pain has asked that I give a quick briefing on the MVPs. And you know what? I'm actually going to do that because it's important. And here's the reason why, because I want everybody on the same page. I don't want you to feel left out. So the MVPS cubed is a system that helps you identify what makes you unique. So type in the chat, anyone who remembers what the M stands for while I look for the slide. Come on now, don't let me down. I know some of y'all were here. I think it's a different PowerPoint. Come on now. What are the MVPs cubed, my dear friends? I'm going to open up this deep dive. Mission, thank you guys. Message and methodology. You get a gold star. Whoever, I think that was you, Crystal, who put all 3 of the M's, you get a free book. So let us know which of our books that you have not already gotten would you like to get a hold of? And I would be more than happy to send that to you. See, there are benefits to sticking with us in these classes and doing the good work. All right, so I'm going to just bring it up on screen. The reason this is important is because you need it to do the rest of this process. So it's going to be a quick review for those of you who were already here. Just pull up your worksheet so that we can see your MVPs cubed. All right? So the MVPs, your mission, your message, and your methodology. The way that we use that language is if you felt like you were a soul on a mission, sent to the earth to do one thing, what would that mission be? You need to be able to say it very clearly. If you could pay for a billboard to have one message, what is the one message you wish everyone in the world knew? From your perspective, what would that message be? So my message is, I believe that all coaches, healers, and light workers can build a profitable and sustainable business by becoming a personal brand and global luminary, totally in alignment with your personality and your values. That's my message to the world. And my methodology, well, okay, you're watching it. The MVPs cubed, that's part of my personal branding system. So I have my own proprietary system. That's my methodology. So what do the V's stand for? Your values. So you've heard it from me. My values are integrity, authenticity, freedom, creativity, flow. What are your values? What do you truly value in this life? What lights you up? What is your vibe like? Are you kind of easygoing and laid back? Or are you kind of like I used to be, very buttoned up and very cerebral? And what is your voice like? And next, what is your purpose or your passion? What are you really passionate about? What's your underlying philosophy of how the world works according to you or according to the system? Like, for example, if you were a nutrition coach and you're into the keto thing, then the philosophy would be all around the keto approach to nutrition and weight loss. And the other P is personality. So you'd want to know all of these things before you hired a web designer. You definitely want to have all of this established before you hired someone to try to pitch you to the media. And finally, what are your strengths? What is your style? What are your specialties? So having a good idea of all of that is going to end up helping you connect with your ideal customer. Does that make sense? Good. All right, so that's the MVPs cubed. So the MVPs, once you really know them, then things get a whole lot easier for you. So I'm going to go back to our other presentation, find my way back. All right, so I'm going to look at some of your comments. Strengths, mission, message, methodology, very good. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Kati. And Britt says, talking with your heart. You have no problem speaking in this moment, but if you're doing a shamanic event, because it comes out of your soul, ooh, out of the inside, lovely. You know that it's not your role to be perfect with your words, but you know you have to send the knowledge to the people. That is that big calling when you just know that you've got to get it out. Absolutely. And yes, it is a little hard when we don't have the habit to do it, but that's why you've got to just keep plugging away and doing it. So I'm so lovely to have you with us. All right, so seeing some of your comments. So where does answering the issues that your client has come into that? that was the other sheet, the MVPS cubed, the RSVP. So, all right. So, all right, I wasn't going to show that one, but maybe I need to. Where does this get into the client? Here's where it gets into the client. It's in your value proposition. So once you've tuned into your strengths, and the reason I did that again was because I don't want you to make a brand like I did. I made a brand reactively, not proactively, my first brand. The people at Discovery said I needed to be this way, so I became that way. I had already had this programming in my mind from the medical community, so I felt like I had to be that way. I had already had programming in my background from my family, so I felt like I had to be that way. So I was crammed into box after box after box, and I created this image like all humans do. We all create this egoic personality. What was worse for me was just that mine was on TV and people were recognizing me as that, and it wasn't in alignment with who I really am. So that's why we take you through the MVPS cubed. And then you start to think about, all right, what are the results that I provide for people? So again, this may not work in the classroom, Jen. It depends on what you're really trying to do. What are the results that you produce? And it could be that you're in the classroom. We have somebody else who is on, who's now going to be leveraging her skills as an educator to now shift the paradigm within school systems and with teachers so that she can help them focus on a child-centric curriculum. So maybe you're taking your expertise, but not using it, well, I mean, hopefully you've practiced it enough in that school, but maybe you want to take your expertise out of that environment. So we can all do that, taking it out of the hospital, out of the doctor's office, out of our therapy room, out of corporate. And we're now going to take those skills, turn it into an intellectual property that can be leveraged through the internet, through the media, through one-to-many experiences like coaching or networking and masterminds and so on. So what are the results that you get? So if you are in a class setting, actually I know someone else who's in a class setting, or she was, and developed a very, very profitable, I think it's close to 7-figure business. So shoot me an email and I'll send you her stuff, send you her links to where she is. She was an educator that developed a new way of empowering teachers. And she has created an incredibly lucrative thing based on her IP. She created the systems, started teaching other teachers and school systems how to leverage it. She wrote a book, and now I've seen her most recently doing videos on LinkedIn and spreading the word. So you can do that in the school system, figure out your mojo, and if you feel like it is something that other schools, other teachers can leverage, then that's where you have the opportunity for creating your intellectual property, your next product, course, coaching, blah, 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 okay? So what are the results that you can help people achieve in their lives? Whether that's the students, whether that's the teachers, maybe you are able to start training other people. Like we have other healers here. You may have had 10 years of experience and now you're realizing, gosh, these new whippersnappers coming out of school, they don't know this stuff and they're not teaching it in school. You could start a consulting business or a coaching or a group program that starts to train other healers. Or you could become a person who does training the trainers. I'm going to give you an example of that. The RSVP method helps you come up with your value proposition. And by value, I mean, what is the value to them? So what is the value to the students? So Jen says that she's got students who are forever telling you that they love your style and that you're genuine. Well, what value does that have? So if you recognize that many times students are in pain and coming to your class is the only relief in the day that they have. It's the same for healers and coaches. They're like, their lives are a mess. They're teased, they're bullied, they don't have enough of this, that, and the other. They feel bad, they're in pain sometimes. And yet when they come and they have an experience with you, they feel relief. Well, what is the value on that? Now, granted, the students are not the ones paying you in that situation, but you can put a value to it. or at least to the parents, for example. What would they pay to not have a rebellious, freaked out teenager or a snotty, bratty school age kid? I don't know what age you're in, but so just go back and watch deep dive number 2 so that you can learn about the value. And then what do you propose? The proposition is, I promise to help you get these kinds of results that will have this kind of a value by using my methodology. Okay, so that's just a quick review. Keep that in mind. What are the results that you currently provide? And that's what you're going to help people get to. All right. All right, so good. So hopefully that clears up some of the confusion. We are going to keep moving forward, all right? Because it's getting late. It's almost 7 o'clock here in France. But I'm committed. I'm sticking with you. All right, so we had gotten to the presentation stage. That is stage 3. And that's when you establish your credibility and you rise above the other people. Present, in my methodology, the presentation stage, the present stage, is where you focus on your IP. This is where you're not just listed as another coach, another therapist, another teacher. You've got your own style, your own thing that elevates your prestige. So that's what stage 3 is. Then stage 4, again, people were asking me, well, how do I get in TV? I mean, how do I get other people to call me? How did you get called to be the headliner with Gary Vee? Well, I had all those other things in place. You don't move into the promote stage, stage 4, where you are able to leverage the media and get called back consistently for podcast after podcast and show after show until you've done those other things. And then the 5th and final stage is when you become a global luminary, when you are shining so brightly and so recognizable as a brand that people trust you, they know you, they like you, and they're willing to buy your stuff no matter where it is or what it is, and they're willing to travel to see you. So when I asked you to write down the now and the then, in my case, I was getting people who were in the calling stage. They were like, I really want to be, I want to be a star. I want to be like the next so-and-so. And I was like, you cannot be the next Oprah. You cannot be the next Tony Robbins. It's got to be your thing. So give me the vision of what you want to do, using what skills and talents and all of that, and then we move to the next step, which is defining the brand, right? So I took people through these 5 stages. It's what I went through, and that is how I arrived at my first personal branding methodology, my first IP in this space. I had already done it as a doctor, but this was how I did it here. And then remember that on that list, I asked you to not only write the steps, but what are the milestones? So this Global Luminary checklist, which I shared with you on deep dive number 1, these are those milestones. So remember I said there's milestones at every step. So when you sent me a message, somebody sent me a message saying, how can I get interviewed by you? What do I need to have in place? Look at this Global Luminary checklist. Look at that position stage. You'll have to just tell me the calling stage. What is your blueprint? What is the vision of what you're trying to create in the world? And for the individual I'm talking about, I already know yours. Did I already say it right? Mm-hmm. You give me the sense of the vision of what you're trying to create. Then I want you to go through this checklist. Are you already through the position stage? Have you established your brand identity? Is there a style book? Or can I at least look at your website and see, oh, you have a consistent style across your website, your email signature, your social media profiles, your business cards. Boom, I get it. Do I know the kind of language that you use? I need to know your brand dictionary. Are you a person that curses or not curses? I have people in my tribe who can, launch an F-bomb like you wouldn't know. What is your avatar profile? This is what we covered yesterday. Knowing specifically who your target audience is, you got to make sure you know that before you try to get in the media. And then most importantly, you want to have something in place where you can start to capture leads. You can start capturing email addresses. Because just being on TV, first and foremost, you can't work with me if you're only in this for the ego. Just to say, ooh, look at me, I'm a #1 best-selling blah, blah. No, that won't fly. You got to be in this for the right reasons, right? to help yourself bring more of your brilliance to the world. And that means that we have to start creating an audience, because as much as I love Facebook and YouTube, well, Facebook and Insta, they're both owned by Zuckerberg, Facebook. And as much as I love YouTube, it's owned by Google. So I'm, just hit the 7,000 subscriber mark on YouTube. Thank you. Love that. Thank you all. 15,000 followers on Facebook. Thank you. And somewhere close to 6,000, because I just only started on Instagram. Thank you. But guess what? I don't own those fans and followers and subscribers. Facebook and Google do. And on LinkedIn, Microsoft owns LinkedIn. I don't own those. You don't own them. So you have got to get people on your own list, and that is with a lead magnet and nurture sequence. Okay? So then you go down for stage 3, which is the presentation stage. Do you have these things set up? Now, you may not have a desire to do all of them. If you're not going to do a TED Talk, that's okay. But you need to at least have some specialty content, which we're helping you create today. Some special system that is unique to you, leveraging your skills and your talents, right? And ideally, you'd want a little bit of social proof. Somebody out there who's talking about you. And then stage 4, I just kind of wrote down, well, these are the key things that you will need to have in place before you move to stage 5. Does that make sense? Has that been helpful? So this is exactly what I did for myself when people asked, how do, you might need to refresh the feed. Just if the video ever stops or it's looking fuzzy, it's a Wi-Fi issue, just hit the refresh button on and reload the page. Okay? So hopefully this has made a little bit more sense to you, just seeing how I took people through their 5 stages, how I created this approach. Make sense? All right. So yes, Audrey, for those of you who asked about the educator, just we'll send that out to you. All right. So is this making sense? Are you getting a sense of it? Now, it's in your worksheet, those 5 stages. So you can start to go through as well to kind of look at which stage am I in, right? So now you have a sense of how I created this 5-stage ascension process. It's what I lead people through on my high-level program, the Global Luminary Academy. All right? So think about it from your standpoint. If you could take someone from point A to point B, what would that look like? All right. So Joyous Beyond Pain says, my mission is a self-healing retreat. Okay. So that's the product you'd like to deliver. So now, if you were just to put out an ad and say, hey, everyone, I'm offering a self-healing retreat, what is the average person going to do? They're going to say, well, who are you? If you've done all the MVPs cubed and the RSVP and you start putting out content that matches that, we can go and read your stuff on Facebook or your website or your posts on Insta and get a feeling for, oh, I get a sense for who this person is. Now, self-healing, how does Joyous Beyond Pain propose that we're going to actually get that? Well, that's where you say, you take them from the now, where they're not healed. I think Joyous Beyond Pain, you're going to need to tell us what your avatar is. What is that ideal client? Like what do they need healed? So you take them from the now, and what are those steps that would lead them to self-healing that you're going to facilitate at your retreat? Once you can come up with those steps, you'll see that Willow, who is leading a workshop on May 12th, has a specific way of doing it. One of our other luminaries, I'm blinking on her name. She lives in Italy. Help me out, Sarah. She's from Denmark. Ninja. She has this ninja process where you come up with letters that outline what each of your steps are. So I'll just explain. Malin Headland, for example, has been doing coaching for years. She actually started off as a trainer with Dale Carnegie and then developed her own methodology of helping executives. And she has created a process called CREATE. And the CREATE are the steps that she leads people to. So she takes them from this feeling of unfulfillment. They're not quite living up to their potential. They've gotten to a level of success and they know that there's another level, but they're stuck. Her CREATE process takes them from there to there. And each step along the way, she's got specific exercises that she's taking them through. Yes, Tina Hansen. Thank you, Sarah Kate. So is this making sense? So Joyous Beyond Pain says they are emotionally or physically in pain. And so you take them through Reiki. You're also a Psy Chem practitioner. And now you need to find a way of helping online. So for those of you who are used to being in one-to-one situations, if you're used to doing one-to-one, or you're used to having to physically like manipulate or stick a needle in someone, right? Then I want you to think about, like, we think that this quarantine might be ending soon. Here in France, they've said May 11th, they're going to start to let people go out. But let's say you're not even sure when you're going to be able to pick back up, right? I gave this example to Isabella, who does myofascial release. She's a physical therapist, but she knows that what she does in her work environment could be extended to other people. She could start training other trainers. So you could start to use this time to develop a training methodology where you're teaching other people. That's if you have the experience and expertise that you feel like you're now ready to train other practitioners or train trainers. But the other thing that you could think about, Joyous Beyond Pain, tell me your name if you're willing, and I'll refer to you by your real name. If those people who are emotionally and physically in pain, what are the things that they need to do before they see you? So, for example, for those of you who can't see people in person, there is a before and after care plan for many of us. So somebody asked earlier, do I need to be completely free of my emotional blocks before I can step out? That's kind of a dicey one. On the one hand, I say no, because most of us are wounded healers and we're teaching what we needed to learn. But you do need to have enough healing that you're not going to be like breaking down on stage or, using, as Derry says it, you shouldn't be standing on stage and using that for therapy, talk therapy, You should have a level of healing and personal mastery that you only have to be one step ahead of your clients. You don't have to be 100% healed. If you know the process to get there and you've lived it, maybe you only help them get to the next step. There's still a value in that. I do recommend that for anyone who really is trying to do this deep work, then you really need to get clean and clear as a vessel. And that was another pivotal thing for me. At Make Your Mark Global, I realized that just providing people with the what, and even when we used to do done for you services where you could hire me to help create your website and your this and your that, which I don't do anymore. I don't offer that anymore. Because if you were not a clear, clean vessel, then you would be vulnerable to things coming up. So what do I mean by that? I mean, what I learned working in the media, hanging out with all kinds of movie stars and celebrities, not that they were all my patients. I did have a VIP list that I never talk about. I never share because that's the confidentiality that I maintain. But hanging out with these A-listers and hearing about the stuff that they are dealing with, you have to have a very strong sense of self and a very solid spiritual core to not get knocked off, meaning the pressure, like I did, the pressure to be what they want you to be and not speaking your truth, the pressure to be thin or look a certain way or do drugs because someone else is, or all that stuff. And so when I started working with personal brands, I realized I had to help my clients maintain that clear spiritual core. Because if not, when you get into the land of those other egos, you might fall back into stuff. And so we have to be mindful of that. So you don't have to be 100% perfect and healed to be able to lead someone on a healing journey, but just be honest about where you are and don't overpromise. It's best to just promise the steps that you can get people through and to. All right? So joyous beyond pain. So we met, okay, so we apparently met in the UK, and you were nervous and you were completely starstruck. Why? I am just normal now. I'm not even a star. But I'm so glad that you've worked on yourself and that you're moving forward. And so you say, Joyous Beyond Pain says, I suffered numerous traumas, physical and emotional, and you've worked through them and you remain joyful throughout. So that's great. So I would share that, you know. And to Raj, is it okay if the milestones are emotional changes in your client? Absolutely. Absolutely. So for all of my relationship coaches out there, I had somebody who was an expert in getting over your ex, and getting past heartbreak. And one of the things before the now stage is you're heartbroken, you don't want to date anyone else, you're eating ice cream on the couch and in pity party land. And the after result that you want to get that person to is being open to dating and then hopefully meeting someone, falling in love, and having your, whatever you define your happily ever after is. And one of those steps would have to be an emotional, there's cognitive and there are emotional shifts that happen before you create some dating profile. It's not like, hey, get over your ex, create a dating profile, go meet someone new. So yes, those emotional intelligence and mindset shifts can be part of the steps that lead your person from their now to then, their point A to point B. All right, so is this helpful for you? Have you gotten a sense that there are some results that you're able to get for people in the world, whether that's helping them overcome overwhelm, getting organized, losing weight, getting off of their medications, healing from trauma, starting new businesses, starting new companies, getting their marketing done. There's things that you can do, and what are those steps? Then if you are clever and you start to recognize your steps, so for me, this one doesn't have any magical acronym for it, but the attunement process and the cornerstone process, they all came up with A's. Like when I got my download, the 5-step process for the attunement process were all A's. Allow, attune, align, action, and appreciation. That's the attunement meditation process. So are there a lot of mindfulness meditation teachers out there? Yes. But I happened to create my own proprietary method, and then I launched it as an online course. I teach it everywhere I go, on stage. I taught it at the University of Monaco. It's like, I led the students through this process so that they would have a way of managing their stress. So yes, I'm glad, Tammy, to know that it has been helpful. It helps you put an order and a method in your brain. And that is it. That is so important. Like, because I am a visionary, because I love to go into la la land, sometimes I do have this flood of information and ideas. And the challenge for me in my life has always been to ground it, to bring it down into an easy to understand, an easy to follow path. That's why I tell you so many stories when I give you examples. That's why I give you visuals. I'm a visual learner. I'm also very kinesthetic, but I like seeing things visually. All right? So I'm glad to know that if this has been helpful. So the question is, what if you're working through your own subconscious programming and you feel you have more to do, but people are showing up to ask you for help and you are able to help them? Well, guess what? That is a call. That's 2 calls. So one is the calling to help these people. You've probably felt it internally, like this desire, this urge to help. And then the universe is mirroring back to you. It's sending you a reflection saying, it's like an echo. You feel it and you're like, oh, I think I want to do this. And the universe says, yeah, I want you to do it too. Here's another person and another person and another person. It's like when people say, Girl, you should write a book. You know, you need to have your own show. That is the calling, right? So the question is, are you willing to say yes? So you might be able to help them to a point. Now, yes, we as coaches and healers have got to always be working on becoming the clearest, cleanest vessel, living as our authentic self as possible. And there's not a person on the planet who hasn't experienced some level of disappointment. Maybe not everyone has got trauma in their background, but sometimes even the little things, just being teased, just being the youngest of 3 children, it leaves an impression. And I had to work on that before I could be as effective as I am today. Now, I was still able to get incredible results in other areas. And now that I can take it all the way to this level of where I am, I'm taking it even more. But it didn't stop me from teaching it. I was teaching the cornerstone process even before I had fully developed self-love because I knew what was needed. I still had to do my own cleanup, but I could help other people. So if other people are asking you and you know you can do it, then please start doing it. Because the more people that we help and heal, it is a ripple effect that's going to go out. All right? And yes, it is synchronicity that you're getting this echo, this reflection. And yes, a ton of people, myself included, have procrastinated, saying, but I'm not ready yet, but I'm not perfect yet, but I'm not. If there's a level of truth, so for example, if you find yourself bursting into tears in the middle of your sessions when you're not you being therapied, but you're supposed to be the coach, then you're not ready, okay? But if you know that you've got enough of a sense of composure to lead some of the way, then do that. And if you know you have more healing to do, then keep doing that. We're all on this journey together and we're all getting better. You know, for me, I was shared recently that I was in the United States, and then we're going to wrap up. Yeah, you've got to put an end to the perfectionism. And if you know it's there, then you've got to stop making excuses and stop procrastinating and give yourself a deadline. Like you've got to have these tangible goals. You know, in this book, we talk all about accountability. If you're not going to be accountable to someone else, then you're going to ultimately have to be accountable to yourself. And that's what I knew for me had to happen. I could procrastinate, I could make excuses, I could put blame in a million different other places as to why I hadn't achieved certain things. But I couldn't lie to myself forever. And when I was in the United States, I was getting this additional training, because I love training, but this one is really cool. Getting additional training on neurofeedback. Using this EEG monitoring system called the Mind Mirror, we can help people through guided meditations learn how to modify their own brain waves such that they can calm stress, they can get into expanded states of consciousness, they can have these magical downloads, maybe even get enlightened. And I was learning with one of the world's foremost experts in this type of neurofeedback. And one of the sessions that I was led through, something came up. And I was like, I don't have no issues. And yet this something came up. And I was like, oh, okay, there's something else for me to work on. Because the reality is we're all there. Like we're all on this ascension journey. We're all ascending into the highest expression of ourselves. While we're still in this earthly body, the human personality and the ego has a lot of little traps. It has a lot of little sneaky ways of hijacking you, of making you feel less than. It's faulty protection, and it's a system that's trying to protect you. It's based on survival. But once you start to tune into higher states of consciousness and you realize this stuff is not real, it's holding me up and it's not real. The fear of being judged, the fear of success. You know, you've heard about this fear, false evidence appearing real. Well, if things are still being looked at as evidence and you think they are real, that's an invitation. That is a calling to do the work. So continue to do the work, right? So we have been here. I thought today was going to be a shorter session as well, but it isn't. So now you have your homework. Oh, I haven't even, there's one other thing I have to show you, and then I promise that I'm going to let you go. It's the money. How can your IP lead to 6 and 7 figures? Well, just tell me, is there anybody that wants that? Or should I let you go and go do your homework and have a nice evening? Type in the chat and let me know if there's anybody who wants to see how you can use this system to make, 100,000, maybe a million. Don't worry, Raj, you are awesome. So, are you considered an expert before you've completed the journey yourself, while you're still in step 1, or only after you've completed your full transformation? Well, it depends on what you're trying to be seen as the expert of. You might be the expert in procrastination. So if there's one step, so if you were to look at that line of going from the now to the then, and there's specific steps, right? And maybe one of those steps is procrastination. How do you get past procrastination? Maybe you've become an expert in that. You may not have all the other ones. Then I would focus on the thing that you are actually good at. Because when you start to look at creating a course, for example, if you were saying, I want to take people from one stage to the next, you may not have the expertise to do all of those modules. You may have to just focus on one while you're resourcing up for the others. So if one of those steps is improving emotional intelligence or overcoming overwhelm and procrastination, or maybe it's losing your first 10 pounds, or maybe it's earning your first $1,000. Like, I could take you to 6 or 7 figures, but maybe what we need to focus on is just getting you to your first $1,000 paycheck. So I would say if you're not at a full transformation, then focus on the transformation you can get to. And there's value in that. There's absolute value in that. So good. Oh, I'm so glad to hear you guys are saying yes, please share. Because I'm realizing, oh my God, I'm running my mouth and it's been forever. It's been hours. Okay, so now I'm going to get into the exciting stuff. Well, it's all exciting to me, but whatever. Here we go. All right, so let's talk about how you can lean into profitability, because that was one of our promises. I have promised you that you can pivot to profit. So if you look at Forbes magazine in 2015, they published this thing and they said that global e-learning as a market was already at 107 billion with a B, my friends. 107 billion in 2015. And then Research and Markets published that by 2025, this global e-learning market, so e-learning is courses online and anything that's online, that can be video courses, text courses, live coaching, it was estimated to reach 325 billion by 2025. But guess what? It's probably going to happen even faster because this pandemic was not anticipated when these studies were done. So how could you possibly earn 100,000 per year? So now I'm going to show you the money. Yes, Jen, here we go. So I don't know if anyone has ever heard of this guy, Kevin Kelly, but he wrote an article, just an article, not even a book, about this concept of 1,000 true fans. And the big companies out there, like the Amazon companies of the world and Zappos, people who are trying to sell things to the masses, they focus on the biggest, what they call the head, the biggest proportion of people on the planet who could be their target market. And they don't focus on this long tail. So the long tail are the people who are just selling, a few thousand units of whatever. They're not maybe selling the millions and millions that you see at the big head, like Amazon is pushing a ton of, cleaning products and gloves and masks. But there are other people who are selling products, maybe only a few, that don't interest the big companies, but they would interest people like you and me. And what Kevin Kelly found, that at that junction point between the big mama sellers and the long tail, there's this sweet spot. And this is what he referred to as a thousand true fans, this philosophy. And here's the concept. Basically is, yes, there's like this whole group of people out there in the whole wide world that maybe you could say your product or your service is good for. But if you had true fans, and there's a distinction here, the way true fans are defined as, these are the people who would buy whatever you're selling because they just love you. These are the people who sleep outside waiting for the new device to come out, whether it's the iPhone or it's the MacBook or whatever. These 1,000 true fans are the people that will buy your stuff in every different format, the book and the audiobook and the CD and the vinyl. They are the ones who are your true fans. And what they discovered is you only need 1,000 people to buy a product priced at $100, and you've got 100 grand in revenue. Now, for most of the coaches and healers that I work with, especially my Lightworker tribe, 100K, that's pretty decent revenue, because most of us are still small. You don't have as much overhead. You're not having to pay a lot of staff. So yes, of course, you may want to have a 7-figure business, but let's start what's realistic. So the reason I'm saying all of this is because sometimes you guys think, oh, but Andrea, you were on TV. Not when I came back here to Europe. I was not on major TV right away. And you think, oh, well, do I have to already be a star? Do I have to already be known? No, you don't. You only need 1,000 people buying a product that's priced at $100 to make yourself 100,000. Now you are going to have to build that up over time, but maybe you only have 100 or 500 true fans. If 500 people bought a product at $200, you'd still make that 6 figures. You see what I'm saying? So this is what's possible for us if we start to think about, all right, what is that first level product? Now, yes, of course, you can scale to 7 figures after that. You can start to do the math. But that's the reality. You don't have to have tens of thousands of followers and 100,000 people on your email list. They just need to become true fans. So you're going to stick with me for the rest of this deep dive training so that you can learn exactly how do you do that? How do you get these people to become those kinds of dedicated fans? Well, it's by doing what we're doing here. And that is really digging deep to find out what makes you unique and different, and then bringing it out. It can't stay in your head and heart. It needs to get out onto your website, onto your social media posts, and eventually into ads if you decide that you want to do ads. And for those of you thinking, well, I mean, I don't know, I'm doing something that people have already done. You know, I have a wonderful global luminary in my network named Ofkia Tekens from the Netherlands. She's a Jungian psychotherapist. She is someone, for all of our educators, she is someone who was in the school system in the Netherlands. She hated the school books, so she wrote her own. She ended up, I think, publishing, I don't remember, Ofkia, if you're still here, 5, 10, 15 books that she used in the school system that eventually got adopted all around the Netherlands in Dutch. But then she felt like I did, kind of confined. She wanted to do more. So she was doing after school homework help. And then she started realizing a lot of these kids had dyslexia. And so she was able to really tune in and provide help for that. But then she got introduced to something called, what is it called? Young Talents or Talent? Sorry, I've forgotten the original thing. But it was all about Jungian psychology. And so she had been a teacher, but she decided to get additional training and became a Jungian psychotherapist. Now, when I met her, I was like, oh, archetypes. Yeah, I know that. And she's like, yeah, you've probably heard of Carolyn Mace. How many of you have ever heard of Carolyn Mace when it comes to archetypes? And who knows what an archetype is? Type it into the chat. Well, she was like, well, you know, Carolyn Mace has already done it. And I'm like, but that doesn't mean that you can't do it. You know, there are lots of Jungian therapists, lots of people talking about archetypes, but they're not doing it in the way that you do it with your unique talents. So let me show you what Ofkia has done. She did these on her own. She created these card decks. So she became an expert in burnout. She'd lived it, she'd seen it, she'd been treating it as a therapist. But to help clients get into their emotions and stuff, she created these innovative ways to help her clients have conversations. So they could pick a card and it would be like a conversation starter. And they're amazing. So these are products. So just because she's a Jungian psychotherapist or someone doing life coaching, you can do it in your own way. Now, when I met her, I told her about these 5 stages. I was like, we really need to brand you as an expert in archetypes. So following the 5 stages, it would be ideal to have a book where you're laying the foundation for what archetypes are, like how can we use them in our day-to-day life. We need that in place. And lo and behold, this was the next beautiful thing that came out of her brilliant brain just last year, just a few months into when we started working together. So she created a manual, so a little booklet, and it's very unique. Yes, it was Carl Jung that started off with the archetypes. Well, you could actually go as far back into Greek philosophy where they started describing these different, at least 4 types of personality types. And then Carl Jung, there's like 80 different types of archetypes. Here's the musician. So you have an inner musician. Maybe he sings off key, but maybe sometimes he needs to come out. The miracle worker. And so what Ofkia developed is this set of cards that helps you tune into these archetypes. And archetypes are just aspects of our personality, our persona, and we can access them. That's what you do when you go into meditation or you tune into, the superhero in you. You're accessing parts of the human experience that have a different flavor. So the artist, the musician, the gypsy, the hermit. My hermit is always active. So what she was able to do is to create something completely unique. So it doesn't matter that other people are doing something in the marketplace, or maybe they've been there forever. Like Carolyn Mace has been doing archetypes for 30 years, maybe, I don't even know. But that doesn't mean that you can't have a slice of the market, because as you saw from that, you don't have to have hundreds of thousands of people to have a really legitimate business. You only need 1,000 true fans to buy your products. All right? So I hope that makes sense to you and that now you've got a framework. So the way that you can do this now is to take this framework, start to whittle it down, and then be sure to join me tomorrow, because maybe you've gone through the MVPs and the RSVP and you realize, well, I've got a couple of different ways I could go. I could go with, maybe just helping people get to stage 1. Maybe, is that the first product I should create? I mean, do I really want to be focused on a retreat or a workshop when we don't really know when people are going to travel and will people have money? So maybe you want to just focus on a virtual product, something that you can put out onto the internet. Well, in tomorrow's deep dive, we are going to take you through a process of how to choose, test, and launch a product in under 30 days. So it means you have to do your work tonight to, at least if you think you have 3 or 4 different potential products, that's okay. Do this little timeline thing that I've shown you. You're taking people from point A to point B. And maybe what you did in our exercise today was a big, long stretch. And maybe you don't really have what it takes to get them all the way there. No problem. Start with a smaller one. If you're just going to take them from point A to point B, create your steps. What are the milestones? How would you know that people have reached those specific steps? And then tomorrow in our deep dive, I'm going to help you choose which one of the several things that you might be able to do. I'm going to help you learn how to test it. So as you saw with Delia that I put on screen, and even with Willow, They're using the process of launching a beta. So you don't have to have the product completely created. You can just throw out and get some feedback and test to see which ones people actually want and what they resonate with. Because we've got to work on the language of how you present the offer to people. So join us tomorrow so that we can, my dog is growling, she wants down. So that we can take you through that process of how to choose, test, create, and launch a product, okay? And that's gonna help you do that in 30 days or less. And the beauty of it is, if it doesn't work, if you don't like the product, or you're not gonna spend a ton of money with this system I'm offering. You're just gonna get it out of you, because I don't want you sitting on your brilliance yet another month, yet another year. Why not give yourself this opportunity to actually make progress in your life, okay? I'm also going to share, when I send out the email with the replay, and maybe Sarah Kate can pop it in the chat. For those of you who do have issues with perfectionism, imposter syndrome, procrastination, a lack of self-belief, honey, I've been there. There's no shame in that. I created a little process of guided meditation and life writing, a journaling process that is totally free. You can just go right online and start doing that process so that you can start working through some of these blocks. Because ultimately, even if you follow this method and you create the product and we think it's cool, you're still going to have to launch it. And so I don't want you to be held up by that. So yes, your homework is, Raj, do the timeline with the steps and the milestone with your avatar in mind. And then you're going to brainstorm the products, like what are the problems that you could solve and how would you take them through it. So first it's the process. I should say this, Raj. Before you're thinking of the product, I want you to think of the process. Maybe you already have yours. Maybe it's a 5-step coaching methodology, or it's a 3 steps to whatever. It's first the process. Then we're going to figure out, well, how would you deliver that as a product? Is it a book? Is it a video training course? Is it group coaching? Is it a workshop or retreat? That's what's going to come, okay? So I hope that this was helpful and it's given you some real practical steps to take next, because you can use this time to pivot into a very profitable state where you can literally come out of this pandemic stronger than ever, personally, by going deep and doing the work on yourself, clarifying your values and living in alignment with it, and then bringing your brilliance out to the world. Because believe me, if you've had even just a thought that this could be helpful for at least one person, that means there are probably close to 1 million people on the planet that could benefit from the wisdom that's inside of you. And then on Wednesday, our session is going to be all about how to write a book and publish it in 90 days or less. So please join us there, because that's going to give you my 3 keys to publishing and writing a book in 30 days or less. And then Thursday, our last deep dive, I'm going to teach you how to make offers, how to craft an irresistible sales offer. I'm going to be sharing with you my simple script that I use in webinars and videos and conversations to enroll high-ticket clients, to sell courses and all of that without feeling sleazy or slimy. I don't like that any more than you do. And so I'm going to show you how one of the processes that I've learned from someone else, and I've put it into practice, and it's been awesome. So yeah, it would be nice if you could do deep dive lessons 1 and 2 before, but you can certainly catch up on those later. No worries. You can definitely get value out of this process, but I would at least think about the things that we've talked about today, the RSVPs. What are the results that you could provide to someone based on your skills? And of course, it should be stuff that actually you want to do, that would really make you feel fulfilled and light you up, so that you're creating something that's sustainable. And then for those of you that like my teaching style and you think that you might like to work with me or get some more additional training from me, then I've made it very clear, I think, that you can join the Authentic Personal Branding Bootcamp, which we are offering right now with a COVID special. It's only $44. Normally, the Authentic Personal Branding Bootcamp, which is a 10-day online bootcamp, it includes video lessons. It includes live Q&A sessions with me every month. And you have lifetime access to it. Many of the slides you've seen, all of that RSVP, MVPS cubed, and the messaging, that comes from my Authentic Personal Branding Bootcamp. So you can get in on that now for just $44 instead of $197. If that's of interest to you, then I know that Sarah is probably putting it in the chat. So all of those online modules in the Personal Branding Bootcamp help you define your brand identity, identify your target audience, create your brand style. You can also create your brand position statements and create your brand encyclopedia. And so if you sign up now, you can do the 10 days whenever you want. It starts as soon as you're ready. And then my live session is like the third Wednesday in May. So every month you jump on Zoom with me live, and that way I can give you feedback. You can share a website and I will critique it lovingly. It's always with love. We can critique your website, the colors, the text. If you're creating an offer and you want us to look at the landing page, how did your offer look? All of those sorts of things we cover in the Personal Branding Bootcamp. And you have lifetime access. So that means all of the video training online, you have access to it for the rest of your life. So every time you have a new product that you want to launch, you go back and do these worksheets and you bring it out to the world. You also have lifetime access to the monthly Q&A sessions. So every time you have a new product, come in to the bootcamp. We have a private Facebook group. So it's a real bonus because you can't buy my time. You can't buy my services to review your content. I don't do those one-offs anymore. Back in the day, I think the lowest you could have ever gotten me was probably $500 an hour. But with this, you get me once a month and ask all the questions you want, which I think you've seen here. This is free and I'm answering all of your questions. All right, so that is the Authentic Personal Branding Bootcamp. If you're in the position stage, this is the essential thing that you really need to get through. And then if you would like to work with me in a 3-month group coaching to help you create your product and launch it to the world, I'm offering for a very limited time a 3-month coaching program. Normally, the only way I work with people is through my mentoring, which is 12 months. The Global Luminary Academy is a 1-year program. But for COVID and to help you get past procrastination and analysis paralysis and actually do the work, I will do it with you. I cannot do done-for-you services, but you can work with me. You have private sessions with me. You also get group synergy sessions where we do live Q&A. And of course, you have lifetime access also to the Branding Bootcamp. And then 3 additional months, that's the bonus. There's 3 months of us actively working. You're going to get something launched, and then you have 3 months of Q&A follow-up. That's different than the Branding Bootcamp. It's more intensively focused specifically on you so that I can give you very specific feedback. All right? And that is only $888. So you couldn't even buy 1 hour of my time for $800. And here I'm giving you private sessions and a group situation. So we currently have, I think, 3 groups forming. So I will assign you to a group based on where you are in the world and the kinds of things you're creating so that there's synergy. You'll be learning from people who might be a little bit ahead of you. There might also be someone who's either at your stage or just behind, and you learn together. But the beauty of it is you actually get private sessions with me, and that's just never been available. The last time I did it was 2017, and voila, it was never this cheap. So that is available as well. And then if you think you would like to do private mentoring in an intensive way, normally that's 1 year, but again, I'm willing to do a private mentoring for a 3-month intensive, but that is by application only. You'll have full access to all of my training. So no matter which of those 5 stages, you might already be ready for JV partners and you just need to get launched. You may be ready for media or giving a TED Talk. I can help you focus specifically there, and you'll have VIP access to all of my content and training. How does that sound? Pretty awesome, right? So no matter where you are in the plan, I will be able to help you do what you need to do to get the clarity that you want. So that is what I'm offering, but we still have more days here. So I pray that you will sign up. I realize there were some challenges today with the link. I apologize for that. This restreaming software is not perfect, but I'm glad that you did get to tune in and attend today. It has been such an honor and a pleasure to be with you during this cocooning. And if you are feeling still a little stressed and anxious, thank you, Sarah, for putting in the resilience link. You can get my downloads. You can download some guided meditations to really help you get into a state of clarity. So it has been so wonderful to connect with you. I'm so grateful that so many of you have stuck with me for so long and you've been chatting and chiming in and asking beautiful questions. It has not been too much. So it's awesome. So I thank you again for being here. If you have any other questions, just hit reply to the email that was sent to you with all of the links. If you didn't get the email, then you need to check your spam folder or your promotions folder, add me to your contact list, drag me to your primary box, and or if you haven't signed up, what you waiting for? Come on now, sign up. I'm not going to spam you. I'm here to share love and share tips to get you to that next level in your life. So thank you, dear friends. I'm so grateful that you've been here with me. I so appreciate your attention, and I appreciate that this is a challenging time, and I honor you for stepping up and exploring ways that you can bring more of your brilliance to the world. It means the world to me that I get to be part of your cheerleading crew, part of that nudging crew to get you to that next phase, the phase that I know you can get to. And hey, we all get there in our own time. I know that today I may have just been planting seeds and it may take you a little time to nurture them. That is totally fine. Just be kind and gentle to yourself. But you know when you're just kidding yourself. You know when you're doing that. Put an end to that. So until tomorrow for our next deep dive, please, my dear friend, know this. You are truly a gift to the world. So share your presence with passion. Much love, everyone. See you tomorrow. Ciao.